guys, welcome to True Crime Wine Wednesday. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherilyn and I'm so glad you found me. If you're not new here, welcome back. Thank you for joining me every Wednesday or Thursday or whenever I show up because I'm kind of a cluster F right now. I'm really sorry. You guys are probably going to be able to pick up like some noise coming out from outside. There's a lovely maintenance gentleman that is doing some snow blowing outside of the Airbnb that we're at right now. And it's like, you can't be upset because like he's really, making it easier and safer for everybody. But I'm also like, hello, sir. It's loud. So if you're picking any of that up right now, I apologize. And I hope it won't be the whole video. Today's video is a long one. I asked, you told, I delivered. Just kidding. This has been in the works for a while. I have to give a huge shout out to my girl Arwen for helping me so much on this. I have been wanting to do deep dives and this case was just perfect for it. There is a lot to uncover, a lot to process. This definitely is one of the heavier ones. I mean, they're all heavy. It's like all true crime, but you know what I mean. There's just a lot going on in one, so it just adds to the heaviness. Oh, we're grading the ice now? Okay. I do want to thank you guys so much for giving me such great feedback in the post that I made asking kind of what you guys want to see in the new year. I am glad, I'm not going to lie, that the general consensus was that you guys would prefer more deep dives as opposed to multiple episodes. I'm also kind of the same when it comes to two-parters because I'm really impatient. So I know a lot of you guys are too, and I was like, okay, perfect. We're all in agreement here that we'd rather do the deep dives instead of multi-part episodes. I feel like it's gonna come through the wall. Oh, it's leaving. Thank you. Oh, just kidding. Okay, it sounds like I'm in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre right now. This is terrible. All right, let's get into this. Before we do, I need to do a riddle for you guys. I forgot last week. I think I was just so excited to be back and it was New Year's and we were celebrating it together. And then you guys were like, where's the riddle, Sherilyn? And I was like, oh yeah, I got so excited. So today I have a riddle for you and it is, what do you bury when it's alive but dig up when it's dead? Dun, dun, dun. All right, let's get started. Today we are talking about, I think, a woman who definitely has the title of the most disgusting, horrible, not just woman, but mother and friend, wife in the entire world. And I mean, that sounds dramatic. It's The Bachelor, the most dramatic season yet. But she takes the cake. I mean, what the fuck? Make sure you stick around to the end also after we go through all of this and I give you an update on how things are going with her today. Today we are talking about Michelle Shelly Knotek, or Shelly Knotek is what she preferred to go by. I'm sure all the Michelles are like, thank God you didn't want to use our name, and all the Shellys are like, we don't claim her. Shelly was born on April 15th in 1954 in Battleground, Washington to Les and Sharon Watson, and she was the older sister to two younger siblings, Chuck and Paul. Her father, Les, owned a bowling alley called the Tiger Bowl, and he was known around town. I guess the way you can explain it is he was kind of a schmoozer. He embellished things a lot. He was known to be a liar. You knew he was most likely talking shit, but you just kind of went with it. He separated from Sharon when the kids were pretty young and then left the children with Sharon. But he finds another lady. She's 10 years his junior. He actually tried to lie to her and say that he was only 4 years older than her. But she found out, and she actually found out through Sharon, who called her up one day and said, hey, not I want him back, you stole him from me. What are you doing with my mans? She said, so you're a stepmom. When are you picking the kids up? So Shelly and her brother Chuck went to go and live with her dad and stepmom Laura. And from a really young age, Shelly's described as abrasive. She had this air about her that commanded attention, but not in a cute, confident way. She was intimidating, even being this young little girl. And if she didn't get her way over anything, she threw massive tantrums. In 1967, Sharon, their mother, was unfortunately murdered, and this left Paul to come and live with the family. So now all of the kids were together, and it was a handful for Laura, especially with Paul and Sharon. Chuck seemed to be the only one who was a little more laid back, but a lot of that had to do with the fact that Shelly and Paul wouldn't let him speak. They just spoke for him. There was just no controlling the kids. They made life hell for everybody around them, especially each other. Shelly was said to put broken glass in her siblings' shoes to make their feet bleed and get all cut up as a joke. She stole money from her family. She was suspected of setting one of the houses on fire. The only person she seemed to respect and listen to was her dad's mother, her Grandma Anna. Grandma Anna was almost like a bigger version of Shelly. She was known around town for being very brash, outspoken. She had to be right about everything all the time. She was even intimidating by size. She was a very broad woman, and she had this foot that like dragged beside her, and people could hear it dragging, so they could hear when she was about to come. She was married to a man named George, and he seemed like the biggest little nugget. Very sweet, kind, quiet. He and Anna owned a couple nursing homes, which was a very good fit for George because he was very tender and nurturing. He wanted to take care of other people, but Anna was complete opposite of that. She ruled with an iron fist. She was very cruel to the residents. Even employees that she had working for the home, she treated like slaves, basically. She would even make them come to her own house to do chores there. Poor George was also not off limits. For 20 years, she made him sleep in a shed that was outside and not inside the home. And this is not like one time, you had an argument and you were like, go to the shed. I don't even know who would do that. But he did this every single night for 20 years. So Shelly spent a lot of time with her grandma, and I think her grandma caught on to the fact that Shelly looked up to her, and she was very impressionable at this young age, and having this little kid who's just as intimidating as you, it almost kind of was attractive to her to like mold another version of herself. She told Shelly things like her parents weren't giving her what she needed to be very successful in life, and she thought she would be the only one who could give her what she needs, so she needed to come and live with her. Shelly loved the idea, but her parents were like, well, no, you're our daughter. We want to have you here at home with us. Even if she was a handful, she's still their child. And Laura did try to take on Shelly and the boys as their own. She wanted them to feel loved by her and not that they were stepchildren. So they say no. This is in 1969, and Shelly's 15 years old, and she's not okay with this decision. I don't think up until this point she's really been told no. So her solution to getting to her grandmother's house is to go to the authorities and tell them that her dad is sexually assaulting her. Huge accusation. So all of the proper protocols are done. She has to do an interview with authorities, and then she also has to do an exam with a doctor. And after the exam, the doctor says this is not true. There was no signs of sexual assault, and after speaking to Les, getting his version of what she said happened, things just didn't line up. So after this, she is sent to a boarding school that is close to her step-grandparents' house, so Laura's parents. So that home is treated like her home on weekends when she's away from school, and unlike Grandma Anna, she does not want to be here. She made it very well known. She intimidated them. She was verbally abusive to them, sometimes physically abusive. Having her there made them feel like they were prisoners in their own home. They wanted to stick it out though. They thought that maybe this structure would be good for her. Having a little bit of a stricter school was going to benefit her in the long run. But instead of realizing that these people, wanted to help her out and maybe it wasn't the worst thing to be there with them, she accuses her grandfather of also assaulting her. That is understandably where they drew the line, and then Shelly was sent to another boarding school. This time she was sent to a Catholic boarding school with the nuns. We talked about the nuns before in another video, and I shared how my mom still talks about them, and you all shared about your parents' experience or even your own experiences with it. And it was a general consensus in the comments that they are very strict. You don't mess around. But even with their reputation of not putting up with any crap, they were the ones who would call home and and be like, hey, are you guys gonna allow her to come home for the weekend? Like, we just need a little break. The nuns were asking her parents to come and get her. It made me think of Problem Child. You know, she's walking down the stairs leaving for the weekend and they're all cheering. After her school year here, she was not invited to come back the following year, which was a huge blow to the family because she had already been turned away from multiple schools prior to finding this one. She's finally sent to do a year of school where her aunt lives. It's 1971 and this is her senior year. And this arrangement worked out the best out of all of the other ones prior. I think mainly because she meets a boy who gives her attention that she requires, showers her with gifts and love and sweet words of affirmation. His name is Randy Rivardo and they start dating. Very typical young love, high school, gonna be with you forever. But when she graduates, she's sent back home, and that's on the other side of the country. They break up, but after her only being home for a week, she calls up Randy. She says, you need to come and live with me here. My dad's gonna give you a job at the bowling alley. You're gonna do some maintenance for him. You come now. And he does. Her parents were so for this relationship and having somebody else take Shelly on that they did whatever they could to make them happy. They did give Randy a job at the bowling alley, and then they also put them up in an apartment that they paid for. Shortly after moving into their apartment, they get married. And getting married in itself can be a very stressful time, especially right out of high school. So they're feeling the pressure. And then to further add to it, Shelly couldn't hold down a job. Even her own father fired her from the bowling alley for missing too much work. So at only 19 years old, Randy's got all of the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's responsible for keeping everything going. And based on her expectations of living this caviar lifestyle on a hot dog budget, he couldn't keep up. Anyone looking in would feel so bad because they see how hard he is trying. But her personality didn't see it at all, did not care. She lacked an ounce of empathy for anybody. She felt this entitlement about all aspects of her life. So as hard as Randy was working, there was no appreciation. She just said, yeah, he's supposed to. Another prime example of this is she really wanted a Volkswagen Beetle. She asks her dad for one. He goes out, finds a car, comes back, but it's a Buick convertible.
My parents, Sharon and Dave, generous, doting, or were they? All I ever wanted was a ballerina Barbie. And do you know what they got me? Malibu Barbie. That's not what I wanted. That's not who I was. I was a ballerina. Graceful, delicate. They had to go.
Enraged does not even cut what she did when she saw the car. This woman's dramatics and manipulation are so out of this world. To punish her dad, she went to her room with a bottle of alcohol and some sleeping pills, left them on her nightstand. Randy comes in and sees her and she's asleep. He can't wake her up, rushes her to the hospital. She has her stomach pumped and the doctors find that she only swallowed 2 aspirin. So she staged this whole dramatic episode because she got a car that wasn't the one she wanted. I mean, the dedication to the theatrics is something else. The next time she wanted something new, it was a new house. They were living in a trailer by this point and she wanted to upgrade. Randy, again, he's doing the best that he can. He's the sole provider though. And instead of getting a job and being like, okay, here, this is what our monthly allowance is now with my income. This is the house we can get. Now we can leave the trailer. She beats the shit out of herself, ransacks the house. So when Randy comes home, she says somebody broke in, beat her up, she's scared for her life, and they have to move out of the trailer, and they do. I'm sorry, but reading that, I just pictured Jim Carrey from Liar Liar when he beats the crap out of himself in the washroom. Can you imagine Randy walking in and catching her doing that to herself? And she's just like, I'm kicking my ass, do you mind? Again, with the quotes. All right, so summer 1974, they're in the house, she gets pregnant, and in February 1975, her daughter Nikki is born. Nikki was a beautiful baby. She said to have her mother's beautiful curly hair and the same color red. Instead of this being a turning point for the family and them coming together and being really happy, they fall apart. Randy realizes he can't keep up. Shelly is the one who takes all of his checks and she's spending them just as fast as they're coming in. And he just dips back to his parents' house across the country. I guess Shelly did try to follow him out there and make it seem like she was wanting to make amends, but it turned out he had this GST check that was coming in and she wanted her hands on it, so she got him to sign it over to her, and then she just left and goes MIA. She left Nikki with a family member, and after quite some time, they call her parents and they're like, have you talked to Shelly? She dropped Nikki off and it's been a while. She's not coming to pick her up. Would you like to have her? Her parents, specifically Laura, is really happy about this. She felt from the get-go that Shelly just wasn't equipped to be a mother, so she wanted Nikki at her home. So they're raising her for about a year, loving life. And then all of a sudden, Shelly shows up and acts like nothing happened, that she wasn't even gone for a minute, and takes Nikki away from them. She moves her into an apartment that she was living at with a man named Danny Long. I guess Shelly's parents knew Danny's family because his mom bowled at the bowling alley. Shortly after they get together, Shelly gets pregnant. So they got married on July 2nd, 1978. Sorry, June 2nd, 1978. And 2 months later in August, another daughter is born and they name her Sammy. Sammy is also a beautiful baby. She's got blonde hair and these twinkling blue eyes. Danny is described as a really great guy, a very good dad. He even treated Nikki like his own. Nikki didn't remember her dad, so she looked at Danny like his and loved him very much. Sadly, for the girl's sake, though, he just couldn't handle being with Shelly. He was able to recognize that she brought out the absolute worst in him. All they did was fight, and mostly it was in front of the girls. He knew just how unhealthy it was, so he left. It doesn't take Shelly long to find another man after this split. She's out at a bar one night, and she meets a man named Dave Knotek. When he sees Shelly, he says she's just the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. You know, like the world stood still. Everyone around her went in slow motion. Her hair was blowing, the light was shining on her. The way I understood it, it was pretty much overnight that she had him move right in and replace Danny. She told the girls, this is Dad. Dave is described as a pushover type. He's willing to do and say whatever he needs to please everybody. So somebody like Shelly, this is prey. But Dave just thinks he's like the luckiest guy in the world to land her. And so one day when she comes to him and tells him that she's got cancer, he wants to be the one to take care of her and show her how much he appreciates and loves her, and he's going to get her back to health. And so on December 28th, 1987, he marries her to show her how much she means to him. After the wedding, they moved to this beautiful farmland, very picturesque, but Shelly's Shelly. And when they moved to this house, everybody's life changes. Shelly would take any opportunity to cause a fight between her and Dave, and she was so malicious and so awful with her words and actions towards him that several times he contemplated suicide. Then it shifted to the children and was so much worse than just words. They suffered from Shelly's violent rages. She'd whip them with cords, throw appliances at them, assault them, and almost every time they could never pinpoint what they did to deserve it. It would just be like 1 minute she was mom, and then all of a sudden she just snapped and attacked them, and they would be crying and apologizing, being like, I'm so sorry, Mom, like, please stop, and having no idea what they're saying sorry for. One argument left her daughter Nikki with a nail embedded in her hand because it was sticking out of the wall when she was shoved into it by her mother. I just can never ever understand child abuse. How much of a cowardly, weak piece of crap are you to overpower and harm a child? Not only did they deal with a lot of physical abuse, but it was also a lot of psychological. Every beating that they received from Shelly, they were made to believe that it was because they were bad kids, they did something wrong, and she would never do something like this if it wasn't like for them. What's really twisted is that the girl said that even at a young age, they recognized that these beatings almost excited their mom. She'd get this rush of adrenaline when she attacked them, and they could see like through her eyes that she liked it. The mind games she played were so sickening. Perfect example, Christmas. Shelly acted like everything was perfect. It would just look like your typical Christmas morning with, everyday family. Showered the girls with presents, did the whole Christmas spread, and acted like this loving family. Then in an instant, it was over. Within days, every present that the kids got was taken away from them. Shelly would tell them that they were bad, they were ungrateful, they didn't deserve anything that she ever gave them. One year, Nikki got a Cabbage Patch doll. You remember Cabbage Patch? I still remember mine. I was a toddler when I got it, and I played with that bad boy like well into elementary, going into junior high. Nikki, like any of us when we got it, was so excited, but Shelly took it away the next day that she had given it to her and hid it in her closet. Nikki said that she would have to wait until her mom went out and then go to the closet and be very careful because her mom would leave traps behind, like pieces of tape in certain spots, so that if it moved, she knew the kids were where they shouldn't be. But she'd be super careful, get to her Cabbage Patch doll and just sit there and cuddle it for a brief amount of time until her mom came home. They suffered so much torment. Nikki more so than Sammy, it seemed. Shelly would tell her to strip down and go outside, and she and Dave would take the garden hose and hose her down naked outside and then get her to roll around in the freezing cold mud. And often Shelly would forbid them to have showers. Being clean was a privilege. So she would be filthy. It was so bad that sometimes she snuck showers when her mom was away just to feel clean and then re-dirtied herself. I can't even wrap my head around this. I don't know about you, but when I was little, I hated showers. I was really scared of them too in some way. I used to say it was because I sank on the Titanic and I was scared of water. I mean, you never know. So when I was putting myself in her shoes, being a kid sneaking showers, I was like, it must have been bad. I mean, I still plan my schedule around hair washing days. Anybody else? If it's a fresh shower day, I can film, I can go out, have a little date night. By day 2, that's like workout day, clean the house, just do what you gotta do day. Then I'll bust out the dry shampoo to extend it even further, but I still smell nice. Speaking of smelling nice, I think this is a good time to break up the video, have a breather, and talk about our sponsor who made this happen. I want to thank our sponsor today, Scentbird. I'm so excited to be partnering with them again, not only because I love their stuff so much, but I loved how excited you guys got about them in the comments. A lot of you already are using Scentbird and really like them, so I loved getting that feedback from you. For anybody who doesn't know or hasn't tried Scentbird, they are a subscription service that sends a new perfume to you every single month, and they have over 600 different brands to try out. And I'm not talking like little tiny vial samples. These are nice hearty sizes. It says they're like 60-day samples, but seriously, these bad boys last a long time. I personally am just not someone who like sprays a lot of perfume, and I don't use it every single day, so I'm just like collecting these, and then I have like this whole like library of scents that I can try. The nice thing too is that you don't have to do it every single month, so if you still have a lot of the one perfume after 30 days and you want to skip a month, you are okay to do so, and there won't be any penalties. You can also choose the scents that you want, so there's no surprises. This gives you a chance to try something maybe you've had your eye or nose on. And then you don't have to commit to like the whole bottle. You get to sample it for only $16, which is so nice because I mean, perfume can range from like $150 to like $500 for like a high-end bottle of perfume. The nice thing also is that if you want to try a couple a month, you can upgrade your subscription to not just get like one bottle, but like 2 or 3. This month I went with Crystal Noir by Versace, Sky by Anna Sui. I also got Isa by Sisley. I think it's pronounced Leth or Leith by Ulrich Lang, whatever it is. All you need to know is that this smells phenomenal. And then lastly, you guys, I got a classic Pink Sugar. Prime example about why I love it that you get to sample these and not commit. This month, I really wanted to try the Versace, so I got the sample, and it was just a scent that it smelled nice like on somebody else that I'd smelt it on, and so I thought it would smell really good on me, and it just like, it didn't compliment me at all, but on my mom, it smells gorgeous. So I was really happy that I didn't just like take the plunge and commit to a bottle. Like I said though, right now I'm just adoring this Lethe or Leith by Ulrich Lang. Oh my God. It's so hard to explain. It's like this like fresh, powdery, cozy, like soft vibe. Like I don't know how to explain it. Just it's like soft, fresh, powdery. It's beautiful. I've also been rocking this like Isa too. It's very like citrusy, I guess, with like a little bit of like a vanilla floral note maybe. It comes with cards too when you order, and then on the back of it it'll kind of tell you where the scents are coming from. So this one says white bergamot, pink pepper. That's the pepper. The pepper I think I'm smelling with like the white bergamot, peony, amber, and Dornano rose. Cool. And then the classic pink sugar, you guys. All my 2000 babies would remember this bad boy. Every time I smell it, I just remember myself getting ready in like a parking lot before I go out to meet my friends at like a bar or restaurant, and just dousing myself in this in my glove box and then going in and leaving my car for like the weekend. And this smells exactly like it sounds, pink sugar. You want to eat yourself, you know, but don't. You guys will be mind blown by the options that they have for you. There is without a doubt something for absolutely everybody. They carry top designer brands like Prada, Gucci, Versace, as well as indie brands like Vince Camuto, Confessions of a Rebel, and then my new fave, Cicely. And all of these samples that are sent to you are 100% authentic. Scentbird works directly with the brands themselves, so you're not getting like a knockoff version of a scent you like. This is the real deal. If you want to check out Scentbird yourself, they are offering my True Crime fam 55% off on their website. You just need to go to scentbird.com and use my code Sherilyn55 to receive that offer. Thank you again so much, Scentbird, for continuing to support the channel and for also keeping me smelling like nice and fresh, even on those like dry shampoo days that I don't feel like hopping in the shower. It really does mean so much to me. All right, so since being at the farmhouse, Nikki is primarily Shelly's punching bag. And then in 1988, her nephew Shane, who was her brother Paul's son, comes to live with them because Paul had a rough go in life. He was in and out of prison, and Shane's mom was suffering from addiction and wasn't able to take care of him. So Shelly offers to take her nephew in to live with them. You Saint Shelly. As soon as Shane moves in, he pretty much turns into Shelly's servant. There was no easing in. Oh, this is a great little home for you. We love you so much. No buttering him up. She didn't even pretend she was a decent human being. I will say when he first arrived, she had a bed for him with pillow and blankets, but not long after, those comforts would go missing. He was also subject to being punished and tortured like the girls were. He had to strip down as well, get hosed down. Just an example of how sadistic this woman was. She would make Nikki and Shane, who are preteens, do this together. She even took it as far as to make them slow dance naked together so she could sit there and laugh. Another time, she duct taped Shane to a wall and put icy hot on his lower area while he cried in pain, and she laughed. Unfathomable. The same year Shane moves in, Shelly announces that she's going to have another baby, and it's actually something that the family is looking forward to. They're hopeful, like a little bubbles, you know, they're gonna be all excited to snuggle a new baby, and it's gonna bring out like a more positive side to their mother somehow, even though she's never been a good mother to them. Now remember, Shelly has told people she has cancer, so she tells Dave that her bestie, a woman named Kathy Loreno, needs to move in with them so that she can help Shelly with the housework, with the kids, taking her to and from chemo appointments and baby appointments. I guess Dave isn't the most thrilled about the idea, but let's face it, Shelly is Shelly and gets what Shelly wants, so Kathy moves in. Kathy was born on August 8th, 1958. She was born in Los Angeles, California, and she is said to be a free spirit, very kind-hearted, helpful, and a non-confrontational woman. She looked a lot like her mother, Kay. She had one sister and two brothers, and money was very tight for the family growing up. Her father, who worked in movies, was killed on set during filming one day. After her father passed, her mom remarries, and tragically, her stepdad is also killed in a car accident. After her stepfather died, her mother bought a camper and took the kids around California camping. I guess Kathy liked to try to escape her reality in the world she was living in, one way she loved to do that was to read Harlequin romance novels. She also adored Dolly Parton. Maybe it has something to do with how glam Dolly was that made Kathy want to go into the beauty industry. She took a course in cosmetology and became a hairdresser. She was well loved at the salon that she worked at by her clients. She was described as big, brassy, and fun. She played softball for fun and attended church regularly. She also loved to get all of her friends together. She probably would have fit very well in with the Wine Wednesday. She was just the person who was always putting everybody before herself, showering other people with gifts and love, even when she didn't really have much. I guess her mom was very demanding, so all of Kathy's paychecks went to the house to pay the bills. So even when she didn't really have much left over for herself, she was giving it to other people. Despite being so adored at work by her clients and her bosses, they had to let her go because she wasn't meeting her sales targets. And her mom didn't seem to really have any sympathy for it because she said, well, if you don't have money for rent, you don't have a place to stay. Kathy felt like she was very lucky though, because this was the time that Shelly became pregnant and needed help at the house. So she thought everything was going to work out and decided what better time than now to move in. The best way I can describe Kathy and Shelly's relationship is that Kathy seemed enamored by Shelly. She had this perception of her that she was the be-all end-all. Whatever Shelly said to do, she did. However Shelly acted, she followed. Anything Shelly said, she believed. So when Shelly would tell Kathy how terrible her children were and how ungrateful they were, she believed it. And when she sees how these children are being treated by their own mother, and Shelly's telling her to do the same to keep them in line and, don't let them get one up on you, you have to rule with force, Kathy did as she was told. She was so ride or die for Shelly that even one day when Laura, Shelly's own stepmother, calls the house to confront Shelly about what is going on with her whole cancer story and how she's not buying it anymore, Kathy's just appalled and she's got her girls back. I guess the story there is Laura rings up Shelly. She says, you know what, Shelly? I'm sick of the cancer crap. I've talked to a few doctors and we all think you're lying. Shelly hangs up, loses her mind, crying to Dave and Kathy. How could she not believe me? A couple minutes later, Kathy's the one to call Laura back and she says, you've really upset her. What kind of mother are you? This is your daughter who has cancer and you're saying you don't believe her. And Laura's like, it's a bunch of BS. You are getting suckered. This is not how cancer works. She's lying. Dave gets on the phone too, says pretty much the same thing. What kind of mother are you? She's going through the fight of her life and now you're just adding this stress on her. Like, how could you do this? Laura did feel bad for Dave and Kathy because she knew how manipulative Shelly was. So she felt, yeah, for sure, you probably do believe that she has cancer and I'm this terrible person who's calling her out on it. So she tries to get them to see the real picture like she is, and she asked Dave, have you ever been to a treatment session with her? And he said, well, no, but I've dropped her off. She's got too much pride. She doesn't want me to be in there to see it. Laura says, okay, so you just wait in the car. How long do you wait for? And Dave says, usually about 8 hours. And Laura says, that is not how it works. She then asks if he's ever seen an insurance bill. And he says, well, no, but Shelly deals with all of the bills. I give her the money and she pays them. So that's, not unusual. Laura just knew there was no convincing him though. She was pretty sure though that he was dropping her off at the hospital and she was leaving out the back and going to, get her nails done or hair done and having some lunch and going to a movie. She was really determined though to try to catch her. One time she and her daughter, Shelly's stepsister, Carol, they try to catch her off guard, so they just show up at the house unexpected. Shelly takes a while to come and greet them, and when she does, I guess she's got this caked on white makeup to try to make herself look pale, and her eyebrows were freshly shaved off. She seemed pretty annoyed that they were there, and Laura said, I just want to get to the bottom of this, because if everything that you're saying is true, then something fishy's going on. This isn't usually how cancer is treated, so let's figure out what we can adjust here. Shelly didn't really want to talk about things, and at one point she excuses herself, comes back from the bathroom, and she's holding like a bunch of hair in her hands, but it's just like, like if you just like cut your hair, just like nice fresh hair. And she's like, I can't be doing this right now, like my hair is falling out, Mom. Laura picks up the hair and she's like, when cancer patients lose their hair, it falls out at the root, Shelly, not just a nice blunt cut. Even with that though, Shelly was like, I have cancer. Just batshit effing crazy. Fast forward a few months to June 1989. Another little girl is born, and her name is Tori. The older siblings, they were so happy. They had this little baby in the house to just distract them. Allegedly, when Tori was only days old, Nikki came down the stairs and caught her mom off guard, and she was holding a pillow to her newborn baby's face. Tori had recently just come home from the hospital because Shelly had rushed her there saying that she quit breathing and Shelly revived her and she needed help. So now Nikki walks into this, and she knew from that moment she needed to protect her. Up until this point, Kathy was Shelly's right-hand man, but like everybody in Shelly's life, she needs to make sure that she maintains that control, and she does it through manipulation and abuse. Soon, Kathy was the target of extreme physical abuse, constantly being belittled. Shelly isolated her from her friends and family. She convinced Kathy that she was worthless and that nobody loved her. She even cut off her gorgeous hair that she was known for. Sadly, in these situations of abuse, the abuser will wrangle anyone they can to maintain that control. Even if you've been a victim, you follow and obey because you just want the focus to be off of you. So that's what she did with the children. She would mind F with Kathy, and then she'd have the kids in on it. For instance, they would agree with their mom that they saw Kathy stealing food in the middle of the night, and that's why they had no food, and she'd have no recollection of it, but she'd get beat for it. One of the worst incidents that she was accused of was going into Shane's bedroom while he was sleeping and crawling in his bed naked. She does not remember this at all and can't even fathom the thought that this is something she would do even if she was sleepwalking. But Shelly's told Shane, this happened, right? And he doesn't want to be on the receiving end of what she's already given him in the past, so he agrees. The things this woman was subjected to is just gut-wrenching. And it's so hard to put yourself in her shoes because it's so easy to say, well, why didn't she leave? So it makes you realize the heaviness of how worthless she was made to feel and how beaten down she was. Not just physically, but mentally, to really believe all of these things that Shelly was saying and doing to her. Shelly even controlled when she could go to the bathroom, what she could wear. She took away all of her clothes until she was only left with a bra and underwear, and that's what she had to wear around the house in front of everybody every day. Just absolutely humiliating. Like she did with the kids, she told Kathy when she could bathe, well, I should say clean off, because she wasn't allowed to use the washroom inside. She had to hose off outside. She also couldn't use soap or shampoo. She had to use bleach to cleanse herself. Bleach. The children were also told that they had to participate in the abuse, which is just as traumatizing to them, because even if they're not the ones receiving it, they're giving it, and it's something they don't want to do and something they have to live with for the rest of their life after that. Not only did they have to participate in the abuse, but they're witnessing the detrimental effects that it's having on Kathy. Kathy, in every sense of the word, deteriorated in front of them. She lost over 100 pounds, became so frail. She was losing her hair. Her teeth were falling out. One incident that really stuck with the children was Shelly and Dave essentially made her use her body, naked body, as a sled, kicked her down this hill, and her body just went over chunks of ice, hard snow, and they made her do it over and over and over again. It was so severe that there was a trail of blood from Kathy on the hill when she was done. In 1992, they moved from the farmhouse that they're at to another one, but this was a little bit smaller, but it was all Dave could afford because he's the only one working. Kathy had to sleep in the pump house at this property, and the girls shared a bedroom with Shane, but he wasn't allowed to sleep in the room. He had to sleep in the closet. At this new home, Kathy sensed that if she didn't do something, she was going to die here. She tried to escape and she was successful, but within hours, Shelly found her. People who know Shelly have actually described that she gets this kick out of being a bloodhound. She's a hunter and enjoys hunting things. So Shelly would find Kathy when she'd escape and manipulate her into coming back. Like, oh, Kathy, come, it's so bad out here. You can't survive out here like this. Can you imagine the trauma and fear and manipulation to go back? 4.5 years she went through this. It got to the point where Shelly was sedating her with concoctions of Prozac and lorazepam, a bunch of drugs she was being given. On top of that, she also feeds her smoothies that is made up of expired food products. So she's having to drink and eat that. And the nutrients that are in there are no nutrients at all. She has nothing fueling and sustaining her body or her mind. It got to the point that she was so weak, so beaten down in every sense of the word, that she couldn't fight anymore. Even the kids on several occasions tried to help her escape, despite them being, upset at one point because she was treating them awful under Shelly's direction. They knew, this is what Shelly does. This isn't Kathy's fault. And if she doesn't get out of here, she's going to die. But Kathy refused to leave. She either thought that she didn't have it in her and couldn't survive, or that she was being set up. It's July 1994, and Dave comes home from work. He was working out of town, so he was usually only home on the weekends or every other weekend, so he didn't see a lot of what was going on. That's not being said to try to give him any grace or excuse him, because he did participate in a lot of the abuse. His explanation for that is that he's being fed all of these things from Shelly, saying that they've done these awful things and this is, punishment. So when he comes home, he sees Kathy and she is just a shell of herself, just gaunt, not in good shape at all. He tells Shelly it looks like she needs help, and Shelly says, well, they can't take her anywhere. Dave says, even if you're worried about her saying anything, there's options. We can just, drop her off somewhere. She would have no way of knowing how to get to the farm. But Shelly wasn't budging. She was like, nope, she'll be fine. And she took the kids and left the house. Shane and Dave are left with Kathy, and who knows with Shelly leaving if Dave would have made the decision to go and drive Kathy somewhere, but he was not given the opportunity. Right in front of them, this labored breathing that she's having starts to stop, and she starts vomiting and choking. They try to perform CPR, try to give her the Heimlich maneuver to unlodge the vomit, but Kathy dies. The kids say when Shelly found out that Kathy had died, they felt like she was genuinely shocked. It's almost like she thought that she was just going to have this person to abuse for the rest of her life, despite the obvious signs that she was deteriorating. Dave is the one who is tasked with getting rid of Kathy's body. He does so by burning her remains, and not just in like a fire pit in the backyard type situation. He builds this cremation box out of sheet metal to ensure that it could get hot enough to make sure there were no remains, and let it burn for 5 hours. And then after that, he took her ashes to the Pacific Ocean and let them go. After Kathy's death, Shelly comes up with this story that Kathy met this truck driver who took her away on, his trucking adventures, named Rocky. I guess there was this photo that she found of Kathy in front of a semi-truck, so she thought that, would be a good fit for the story. You know, here's Kathy in front of Rocky's semi. So this is what she told Kathy's family. And not only was she trying to manipulate them and believe this, but she also started with the kids who were very aware and saw what had happened with Kathy. She'd say they were, you know, remembering things wrong. She said, Kathy didn't die. She went off with Rocky. You remember him. You've met him before. Don't you remember? We all had this conversation.
You don't remember anything.
Absolute gaslighting. And it just got to the point where whether they were trying to appease her or whether they were just starting to mentally break down, they believed that Kathy left with Rocky. Well, I should be clear with that. The girls were like that. Shane wasn't. I'm sure there was a part of him that had this pushback because he was there when Kathy died. He had that on his conscience. It happened in front of him. So when she would say she's with Rocky, even though Shane knew defying Shelly wasn't gonna be good, he said, no, she's not. She's dead. It's no surprise Shelly didn't like that, and she starts getting paranoid that Shane's gonna say something. She would tell Dave every day, he's gonna get us tossed in jail. Dave would just say, you know, you're just paranoid. He's like our son. He calls us mom and dad. He would never do that to us. He's just upset right now. Since she can't get Dave on board, you know, with the paranoia, her solution is to instill rage in Dave against Shane to get him to turn on him. And she starts by accusing Shane of something so sickening, I can't even imagine what he felt like being accused of something like that and knowing you didn't do it. She comes to Dave one day and she's holding their youngest daughter, Tori's underwear, and it's got blood on it. And she says, look, Shane did this. He's abusing our daughter. Dave does what I think any father I know would do if they believed that and beats him mercilessly. The beating was so bad after it was done, Nikki goes to console Shane. And Shane says, we need to get out of here. And I have something that I think will help us. He pulls out these Polaroid pictures that he has hidden in a teddy bear, and they're photos of Kathy in very rough shape. I think they could have even been taken the day of or before she died. She is just this shell of who she was. She's unclothed and so weak that she's crawling on the floor. Nikki, being so brainwashed, so controlled and terrified of her mother, in her heart she knew he's right. We've got to go. Let's do this. But the fear of actually carrying it out and everything that she experienced led her to go to Shelly and tell her about the photos. Shelly goes straight to Shane, freaking out, hitting him, asking him, you know, how could you do this to us? When Dave gets home, Shelly says, you need to take care of the situation, and spins it like, I don't really have anything to worry about. I wasn't there, but you were. And if he says something, you're the one that was there when she died, so you're going to go to prison. Dave goes down to the barn, grabs a rifle, goes to the pump house where Shane is living, and shoots him from behind. And just further proof of how twisted this woman is, when he comes back to the house to say, okay, you know, it's done, Shelly goes, what's done? I didn't mean for you to actually kill him. So planting the seed instantly that he's the one who made the decision. He did it, and she would have never wanted him to do that. Shane's remains were also burned on the property and brought to the ocean and released in the same spot Kathy's were. The kids have no idea what happened, and when they wake up, Shelly's got this birdhouse that Shane had made and a note with it that says, I'm sorry, Mommy. I love you. She says Shane ran away, but, you know, don't worry. We're going to find him and bring him back. The girls really loved him. They saw him as a brother, so they were devastated when he ran away. I'm sure Shelly wanted them to just kind of forget about Shane and just move on, but they asked about him every day. So Shelly needed to come up with stories. She would say, oh my God, you guys, guess who just called? Shane just called. You just missed him. Or they'd ask, you know, like, have you heard from Shane? And she'd say, yeah, I spoke to him the other day. He's up in Alaska working on a fishing boat out there. Like, he's doing really good. So they never got to speak to him themselves, though. It was always Shelly who got the call. When Shane and Kathy were gone, Nikki became the main target of her mother's rage again. Things had gotten so bad that there was one time that Shelly was chasing her around the house with a knife, and she stabbed Nikki in the leg, and it was so deep that she should have gotten stitches. But Nikki just ran out of the house and went to hide in the woods and didn't even try to get help because there was that battle of the fear. You know, what should I do? What's the right thing? If I go to the hospital, are they going to make me come back to my mom? And now I went to the hospital. So she just slept in the woods for the night. Fortunately, she found a way out of the house in 1993 when she graduates and enrolls in community college. As soon as Shelly sees this bit of independence that she's about to get, though, she just is grasping at whatever strings she has left. She told her she wouldn't give her any money to have clothes, took all of her clothes away, told her she could no longer sleep in her bedroom and had to sleep on the floor in the living room. She lost her shower privileges. And then one day, her mom attacked her and Nikki fought back. I don't know if this was a wake-up call for Shelly and she realized like, okay, she's actually stronger than me and I need her out of here. So she sent her to go and live with her aunt. Shelly, in true Shelly fashion though, made sure to keep that control at home though and told Sammy and Tori that Nikki wanted to leave and that she couldn't stand being their older sister and that she just didn't love them anymore. Tori was really upset about Nikki leaving and she would write these secret notes to her and say she was sad that she left but she understood why, but she never was able to send them. It was just almost kind of, you know, putting that emotion to paper. And one day Shelly found these notes and, you know, they don't paint her in the best light. So Tori started becoming the target of Shelly's abuse. It's so bad that one of the classmates' moms of Tori's confronts Shelly and she says there's quite a bit of bruises on that girl. And Shelly just plays it off like, yeah, I know, she's so clumsy. We're always telling her to be careful, but it's Tori. Poor Tori. Next, Sammy is the next one to leave home, and you can't blame these girls. If they have the opportunity to leave, you know, you take it. It doesn't make that decision, you know, less hard though, knowing that you're leaving another sibling behind. With Sammy though, she did come back and forth, and I think a part of that was for Tori, and I also think there was a part of this hope or something that maybe her mom could be a decent human and a loving mother. She had this feeling like, you're my mom and I want you to be a mom. So she left that door open a little bit. One example of that going back and forth is that Sammy started to get that F you attitude mom, you know, and she pushed back as well as Nikki had done when she was getting older. And she was at school one day and her teacher said, your homework is late. And this was something that Shelly, well, she never admitted to doing, but conveniently the girls' assignments would go missing all the time so that they would get in trouble in school too. And so when her teacher says, your assignment's late, you're gonna get a 0 on it, Sammy said, well, my mom ripped it up. Then when she would be late for class, her teacher would call her out on it and she'd say, well, you know what? I slept outside in the barn because my mom kicked me out of my room. So I didn't really get a lot of sleep and I slept in. There was quite a few times that these comments were being made. So eventually her teacher pulls her aside and says, you know, I don't think that you're being sarcastic or cheeky with me. I think something's going on. And Sammy just breaks down, starts crying, and tells them everything, that their mother is abusing them. Then that panic sets in though, because she realizes, I've said this out loud now to somebody else, which none of the kids had ever done. And a part of it, I think, was that they all didn't know if they would ever be believed. And her teacher and counselor, they believe her. And so they're going to lift up the phone to call social services. And Sammy just freaks out and panics. And she's like, hang up the phone. I made it all up. You know, sorry. I'm just a bad kid. I didn't do my homework. I lost my library books. I'm late because I just didn't want to come to school on time. Again, it's so tough because reading and learning and hearing these girls tell their story, it's suspenseful almost, because your mentality is get her, you know, let that phone call go. Let's get her locked up. And then when it doesn't happen, it's just a reminder that you never know what is going on behind closed doors. You never know how somebody is feeling and how long they've been subjected to this treatment that they just can't do it. You know, it's so easy to say, why didn't you, unless you're in that situation. So with Sammy and Nikki Being gone for the most part, this leaves Tori as her mother's main target. A lot of the abuse that Tori dealt with was humiliation, which is just disgusting. Shelly would tell her she needed to do what she referred to as progression exams. And what that meant was she would make her get nude and then critique her progression of developing. Like, what in the actual what? Now, you know, Shelly is never satisfied in life. The house, kids, husband. So after years of Dave trying to keep her happy with just his sole income, Shelly decides it's time for her to get a job. Now, get this, okay? Shelly lands a job at an assisted living facility. How these monsters fly under the radar and insert themselves in like the most vulnerable situations, I don't get it. We don't know how she gets in this situation, but she does. And while she's working there, she meets a man named Ron Woodworth. He was doing some volunteer, I believe, with Habitat for Humanity, and he was trying to help this elderly woman's 80 cats get homed. And it causes him to come into Shelly's life. A little bit about Ron. He was born on December 15th, 1945. His parents were William and Catherine Woodworth. And Ron is described as a very vibrant man. He wore lots of jewelry. He had long hair, big personality. But when he meets Shelly, he was at a point in his life where he was going through a bit of a rough patch. His father had recently passed away and he was very close with him, and it was a really tough situation to go through. And he changed from that loss. And so his husband of 17 years left him because he couldn't pull Ron out of the slump, and he felt like he actually had completely changed from who he had known all of those years. So him and Shelly built a close bond because she's there during this, low point in his life, and she's lifting him up, giving him friendship. Tori even becomes really close with Ron. She even calls him Uncle Ron. They would also play checkers and cards together, and Tori really liked him because he let her win. So Ron has lost his father, his husband, his home, and Shelly says, you know what? Come and live with me, decompress, press the reset button, start fresh. He agrees, despite actually having a lifelong friend of his who also offered for him to come and live with her. He thinks that this is just going to be a better fit. He's really getting along with Shelly, really loves Tori. When he first moves in, it's great, living with Bestie. He's getting delicious home-cooked meals, but within less than a couple of weeks, Ron's quick wit and humor starts to be used against him, and he sees like a side of Shelly he never had before. He would crack a playful joke and Shelly would turn around, just berate him, ask him who he thought he was, crossing a line and thinking that he was funny at her cost. Ron's story just made my heart ache because you just can't assume you're gonna know how somebody is gonna act or what they would do to try to save themselves or wouldn't do. And it makes you see how terrifying manipulators are. Because by all accounts, Ron didn't know Shelly long. And this wasn't somebody who he could kind of give a pass to. He thought he knew her. He thought he was a good judge of character. He also had a strong personality, but at the snap of her fingers, Shelly's able to take complete control because she came into his life when he was at like the lowest it had ever been and such a vulnerable state. At the beginning when he got there, Ron had shorts and some shirts that he would wear to do work outside, but as Shelly does, she started taking away his belongings and possessions until he was left with just a pair of underwear to work outside in. She would tell him, you don't deserve clothes, you're worthless, don't even ask about your clothes. She'd tell him to get his fat ass outside and do the list of chores that she had for him. This list was so long that Ron would start his day doing chores outside at 7 a.m. and usually come in around 8:30. In the evening, she would give him sleeping pills and make him eat upstairs alone. Even though there was a room and extra beds in the house, Ron always had to sleep on the floor. This really affected Tori too mentally because she loved Ron so much and she hated seeing the way her mother treated him. And she'd even ask, why are you being so hard on Ron? And Shelly would just like whip around and say, if you love him so much, like, why don't you marry him, Tori? Such a piece of bullshit Shelly. Not long after Tori asked about his treatment, she made Ron go to Tori in the living room and tell her that he didn't love her anymore and that he didn't want to be her uncle. And then after that, Shelly told Ron he was never to speak to Tori again. So if she spoke to him, he had to ignore her. There were several times that Ron did try to escape, but Shelly always found him, and she used Tori as the tool to get Ron to come back. She'd bring Tori with her and have her be like, please, Uncle Ron, please come back for me, and he would. Ron also wasn't allowed to use the washroom in the house, and she would tell him, I don't want an F like you using my washroom. F being a derogatory term for a gay man. So she would force him to do his business outside, and then when Dave would come home on the weekend, she would spin it and say, look what I found out here. You know, he's going to the washroom in our yard. How disrespectful. Are you going to let him treat our house like this? And then Dave would go and turn around and go off on him. One day, Shelly even found a cup that had some of Ron's urine in it, which, I mean, let's just acknowledge in itself how not disrespectful he was, that he's being forced to go outside. He lives on farm. Instead of just going on the land, he does it in a cup. But when Shelly finds it, she makes him drink it. The abuse was just unrelenting. She would even make him abuse himself. Like, she would tell him to hit himself and hit himself harder. She'd say, look at all I've done for you. Look how disrespectful you are to me. You make me sick, Ron. You make everybody sick, Ron. Is anybody else's blood boiling? While all of this is going on at home, she is still taking care of elderly people. And one of them required like around-the-clock care, and she had really buttered this one up. His name was James McClintock, and he went by Mac. He was a Pearl Harbor veteran who absolutely loved his Labrador, Sissy. And coincidentally, he was actually a family friend of Kathy Loreno's mother, Kay. But this is not how he met Shelly. Shelly really was laying it on thick with Mac. She was acting like this daughter that he never had. On more than one occasion, Mac asked Shelly to come and live with him because he required so much care. She said she couldn't, and she had kids at home she had to take care of, but she said she had somebody who could come and live with him and help take care of him while she wasn't there. And this was Ron. So she wanted Ron to go and move and take care of Mac, and she'd get paid for it. Ron was over there nearly every day taking care of Mac. Some days he would even spend the night. But just to show like how much Shelly still controlled, even when she wasn't around, he would never sleep in a bed. He would sleep on the floor. It's just so sad that even after being abused, like mentally, physically, he eventually stopped running or stopped trying to leave. He even went for lunch with this childhood best friend of his, and she was saying to him, you know, Shelly's shady as shit. Come with me. And he said, no, she's got this. I'm good. Just a twisted freaking ugh. With Mac, anybody who knew the type of person Shelly was could see what she was up to. She was over the top and nauseatingly sweet to him. Not that he didn't deserve great treatment, but when you know it's coming from her, it's disgusting. She would brag to people that Mac was like a father to her. She'd like rub his feet with lotion. When she wasn't there, she made sure that she was checking in, making calls to him to say she was thinking about him, making sure he was doing okay, let her know if he needed anything. She even got Tori very attached to him as well, and Tori looked at him like a grandfather. Their relationship did sound quite cute. Tori would listen to Mac tell war stories or funny stories throughout his life, and they'd also have scooter races because he was on a mobile scooter. So all of Shelly's work paid off when she finds out that Mac left everything to his dog Sissy in his will. But when Sissy passed, everything was to go to Shelly. This was all set up in September 2001, and by February 9th, 2002, Mac is rushed to the hospital. A lot of what happened here is unknown. Shelly said that he suffered a bad fall and hit his head, and the only people who were at the home were her, Ron, and Mac. Unfortunately, when Mac arrived at the hospital, he died. Shortly after Mac died, Kay, Kathy's mother, wants the investigators to look not into her daughter's disappearance because she thinks she's run off, but into his death. She finds out that Shelly is the one who is supposed to collect everything, and she thinks something's up. The authorities look into it, but they don't really seem that bothered. When they speak to the coroner, he confirms that there was an injury on his head that was consistent with probably a pretty big fall. Since there was nothing else on his body that looked suspicious, the investigators just left it at that. After Mac's death, Shelly just ramped up her torture on Ron. She'd always scream at him, telling him he killed Mac. It got to the point where she just referred to him as a murderer over and over and over, just drill it in his head. You're a murderer. You're a murderer. You murdered Mac. And it got to the point where she'd call him a murderer and he'd say, yes, Shelly, I'm sorry. The last time Ron saw anybody in the life he had prior to being with Shelly, it was his longtime friend who had seen him throughout the course of his time with Shelly and didn't like what she was seeing. They went for lunch, and it was in the summer of 2002, and she was appalled by Ron's appearance. She knew him as this warm, vibrant, funny man. When she saw him then, he was filthy. He was in tattered clothes, and he was very spaced out and incoherent sometimes, and then irrational. He told her he had been prescribed a few things from his doctor to help with his mental state since everything that had gone on with him, and Sandra begged him to come back with her, but he wouldn't. She couldn't even reach out to his family to get them to try to help her get Ron to leave, because behind the scenes, Shelly had been getting Ron to write these postcards and letters to his mother. They were very threatening. She'd force him to write terrible things about her and say things like he never wanted to see her again and that he was going to harm her. So many of these letters were sent out that his mom had issued a restraining order against him. One afternoon, a police officer actually comes to Shelly's farm to deliver a restraining order. And Ron sees the police officer, but Shelly has in his mind drilled it that he's killed Mac. When he sees a police officer, he thinks he's going to get arrested for it. So he runs and hides. They meet with Shelly instead, and she tries to lie and be like, oh yeah, like Ron's not here, even though they just saw. So she manipulates them by saying, okay, listen, he's here. He's got a lot of health issues going on right now, though, that we're trying to smooth over, and he's got a really bad heart condition, and I'm just worried that with all of this stress, something's going to happen. So let me talk to him, smooth things over, and then I'll get him to come and see you at the police station. They agree, and maybe if they did talk to him, things would have been different if they saw the physical condition of his body. Among the growing list of injuries that he had, his feet were shredded at this point. He could barely walk because of a torture episode that Dave and Shelly had put him through. It started one day when he was working on the roof trying to replace some shingles, and he fell off the roof. And instead of helping him, Dave and Shelly are screaming at him to quickly get up. And when he gets up, he can't put pressure on his foot. It's clear that something in his foot or leg is broken. And instead of, again, getting him some help, they tell him to keep jumping on it. And not just jumping on it on land, they have him climb up on the deck and jump off onto gravel beneath him. He's made to do this over and over and over again, and he's just screaming and crying in agony with each jump. I can't even imagine what condition his feet were in. When he was finally allowed to stop, Shelly and Dave treated his injuries by boiling a pot of water, bringing it out to the pool house that he was sleeping in, and submerging his feet in this boiling hot water that also had bleach in it. Tori felt so awful for Ron. She said that the last month of his life, he was literally smelling like rotting. Even with his condition, Shelly still made him do his chores every single day. She would treat his feet at the end of the day with this boiling bleach concoction. It got to the point where he couldn't walk anymore. He couldn't even make it to the pole building that he was sleeping in. He would just sleep on the porch because he couldn't crawl his way to anything. Tori said the last time she saw Ron, Shelly was feeding him some whiskey, and she told her that she was going to take him to Mac's house so that he could just get some rest. Tori was really worried about him because she could see the condition he was in and didn't think that he should be alone. So she kind of just knelt down and asked him if he was going to be okay. And he was pretty liquored at this point, so he gave her a little smile, a little wink, and a little nod. Ugh, my heart. After Ron had left, he was gone for about 3 days. And then Tori says that Shelly started going to her saying, you know, if anybody comes around looking for Ron, you tell them that he went to Tacoma. The same day, Shelly called Dave and let him know that he needed to come home immediately, that she had just woken up and found Ron dead on the back porch. Dave couldn't come right at that moment, so before Tori saw anything, Shelly had taken Ron out to the barn and placed him in the freezer to wait for Dave to come home to get rid of his body. She's nervous with Tori wondering where he is, so she calls Sammy and says that Tori needs to go out there and spend some time with her where she's living with her boyfriend just for a few days. When Dave comes home, he cannot get rid of Ron the same way he did with Kathy and Shane because there was a fire ban in the area at the time. So instead, he had to dig a shallow grave in the yard, place Ron's body in it, and then just cover it up with some brush and some sticks and stuff. The plan was when the fire ban was lifted, he was going to dispose of his body the same way that he had done with the others. As all of this is going on at the farm, Tori is with Sammy, and they're just, catching up as siblings, get to talking. And I think the older girls maybe felt like Tori didn't really experience what they had because she was the young one and the baby, and they weren't at the house to see anything. It kind of comes up that they all lived the same life and all went through the same torture. And there was a brief conversation about, did they really think that Shane was living in Alaska and had gotten away? As much as they didn't want to admit it, they felt like something bad had happened to them. And Tori brings up that she thinks that something bad has happened to Ron. They tell her, this is our chance right now to stop her. She's just going to do this again. You need to go back home, try to gather as much information, as much evidence as you possibly can to prove that he's dead and she killed him. At this point, Nikki was involved in the conversation, and she shared the importance of having something physical to bring to the authorities because she had actually already tried to go to the police and report her mother, and no one took it seriously. It wasn't long before that she went to tell her grandmother that she believed her mom had killed Kathy. Laura, already knowing that Shelly is batshit crazy, has Nikki call the police, and this police officer just says to write out a statement and then fax it into them. You're accusing your mother of being a murderer, so you must feel pretty strong about it because it's your mom. And the person says, yeah, just fax in your statement. When Nikki's boyfriend finds out that she just had to fax this statement in, he said, this is not okay. You need to go to the police station and talk to somebody. So she did. She went and spoke to an investigator, told him the whole story, and he says, you know what, we've already been out to Shelly's place. We went to go ask some questions about Kathy when she disappeared, and we had no reason not to believe that she didn't go off with Rocky. She's a grown woman. Who are we to say that she's missing if she's just off with the love of her life? And that was it. I couldn't imagine, it'd be like a nightmare where you're trying to run and your legs don't move fast enough, or you're trying to scream for help and you can't make any sounds. She finally gets the courage to say out loud what has happened to her, what she suspects her own mother of doing. And then the investigators are like, yeah, no, it's fine. We've already checked her out. So with Tori knowing what she needs to do, she's like, I've got this. So freaking brave, goes back to her mom, acts like everything is cool, and she goes around seeing what is left of Ron's that she can collect and hide. She found things like his underwear and some of the wrappings that Shelly had on his feet that still had his blood on it, so it was good to have that tangible evidence that would align with the story. And then she notices this raised dirt in the yard, and it's got some ash from the fire pit put on top of it, and it looks like it's supposed to try to be concealed. She doesn't want to go there and be like, I think it's Ron, but she thinks it's a good idea to go over and even grab some of the dirt and the ash, and also hides this. Her hiding spot was in the chicken coop. So she goes back to the house, calls her sisters, tell them it's ready to go. This time, Sammy and Nikki go to a detective together and they lay it all out there. They gave as much graphic detail as they could about the abuse that Kathy and Shane had suffered. So authorities take it serious enough that they at least want to get Tori out of the house. So they call Child Protective Services and arrange to have Tori picked up that morning. Tori knew that she was going to be getting picked up, so what she did was actually wrote out notes for the police to find in the house, showing them where certain events happened and then also where they could find the evidence in the chicken coop. So she's picked up. Shelly and Dave lose it. They tried calling the sisters and asked if they knew what was going on, and they just played it off like, we have no idea what's going on. Did you really think you weren't ever going to lose your children, Shelly? Since they're not getting any answers, Shelly sends Dave to go and try to find out what's going on and when Tori can come back home. For a little bit, he plays stupid, and eventually the detectives are like, listen, she's here for a pretty big reason, and you know what it is. So if you want to tell us, go for it. And he just breaks down. Not only does Dave admit to disposing of Kathy and Shane's bodies, but he also says where they can find Ron's body currently on the property. On August 8th, 2003, both Dave and Shelly were arrested. Shelly was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Kathy and Ron. David was charged with first-degree murder in the death of Shane. He was also charged with rendering criminal assistance as well as disposing of human remains. Through plea negotiations, though, the Knoteks were given lesser charges for pleading guilty. Shelly entered an Alford plea, which we've talked about in other cases, where basically she doesn't admit to responsibility, but acknowledges that the prosecutors have enough evidence to charge her and prove her guilty. She pleaded to 1 count of second-degree murder and 1 count of manslaughter. Dave Knotek was sentenced to 15 years in prison for the second-degree murder of Shane. He's already out. Shelly was sentenced to 22 years in prison, and she will be released in 2022. This year. The girls had been really silent about what had happened in their life for a long time, but as this date is approaching, they wanted to share their mother's story. They wanted it to get out there so that when she's released, she can't do to other people what she's already done to these victims. They helped author Greg Olson write the book If You Tell, and I would encourage everybody to read it, but I'm not gonna lie, it is tough to get through. That being said, I mean, it's so important to read and learn about those situations and, you know, kind of take that on so you can feel the severity of the situation, especially since, like, she's going to be on the streets soon. Yeah, I cannot even fathom that she's just going to be out. Remember her face. Don't get sucked in. All right. That is it for me today, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It means the world to me. You know I love and I appreciate you so much. Thank you again to Scentbird. Make sure you guys check out the link for that below. Oh, and the answer to the riddle. Quick reminder. What do you bury when it's alive, but dig up when it's dead? And the answer is a plant. I don't know why these get me so, like, excited sometimes. Anyway, I'm so excited to see your guys' answers for that. All right, I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly. Until then, make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.